Okay, okay. A very good morning to all. So today we are going to discuss about overview. Of course, this presentation will be able to cover only the overview of the whole area of research project preparation for undergraduate students. We all are aware that the UGC and particularly Gauhati University has taken a very serious step, very comprehensive step to develop the research spirit at the undergraduate level. In this line, and all the disciplines, almost all the disciplines, are bound to introduce the students with the research, the big domain of research, right at the college level, at the undergraduate level, so that they can gradually develop their spirit, they can develop their idea, their ignition, of inner ignition, to develop their skill for problem solving ability, identification of the problem, and problem solving ability, and to project to the right kind of scenario, what is exactly going on in a respective department, a respective discipline. So in this context, all the departments, all the teaching departments of the undergraduate level are supposed to introduce the students with certain project works, which led to, I think it is 100 marks, if I'm not wrong. It 100 marks, sir? I'm not sure. The total marks allocated for the project works. Some departments it may be 20 marks, and some departments it may be 20 marks. I think it is internal assessment, and regarding remaining 80 marks for the total evaluation of the total project.
It is complete one paper.
100 paper, yes.
One complete paper for some.
One complete paper. So in this line, I want to have a discussion on this. What are the underlying that should be taken into consideration while introducing this research project to the undergraduate students. So we all know that project work is an organized set of activities that allows the students, a researcher, to study, carry out a research where they act by themselves. This is very important. We should develop their skill. That is why we should try to allow to work them at their level best, and we should guide them. And they should, the project work the students are get involved, they should be given the privilege to choose a research project of their own, so that they can choose their research projects considering certain obvious factors, that the availability of the data, availability of the sample, and the time constants. That is most important one. It should be completed within a stipulated time frame, so that they can select the survey population, they can select the right methodology, and so that they can select complete the research within the stipulated time frame. So we have to encourage the students so that they choose their topics of their own. Of course, being a teacher, we have to help them out. Level project. But our main concern is to allow them to choose the topic based on their interest. So this way, we can. If the students select the topic of their own, there is a high probability and chances of getting their inner instincts and the inner involvement to a greater extent, other than if we assign a topic of our own without taking certain obvious limitations of the students, that might result something gloomy. So we should try to encourage the students so that they choose their topics of their own. Of course, we have to guide, and obviously we have to guide. So most important things that I believe, one of the basic requirements of the education is to develop the art of questioning, not to accept any proposition, not to accept any established belief without questioning, without investigating, without reasoning, such and such step. And this is the basic skill, basic foundation of developing the inner intelligence of the students, so that they can develop their research skill in the future career life. Most of the time we happen that we accept most of the things that is proposed by our higher ends, maybe a political proposition, maybe an economic proposition, maybe any social strata. we accept the things without questioning. That is very dangerous. That is very dangerous. For the sake of a developing society, for the sake of the democracy, for the sake of the stable society, for a developing society, progressive society, we have to develop the art of questioning, the art of investigation, not to accept any proposition without any valid reason, without any valid data, without any valid inferences. But that is the basic stumble block. I think this is the background why the project works has been introduced right at the undergraduate level. Of course, now not only in the undergraduate level, the CBSE also has introduced some project works right at the high school level also, in the higher secondary level as well as in high school level, particularly from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And they have CBSE also have taken this included this in the syllabus, so that we can develop the inner skills of the students of the art of questioning, art of investigation, art of planning, for the sake of a developing society, for the sake of a for an evolving society. So we have to develop the analytical skill also, so that they can analyze at the end, and so that they can find the reasons why this proposition has been accepted, why this proposition should not be accepted, and why a particular doctrine that we are following since our childhood or since we have grown up, why it should not be questioned. So all these things are very closely taken with the growing intelligentsia of the students right at the tender age. So this is the background. Nurture the creativity of the students, develop the problem solving ability, promote the skill of technical writing. Of course, technical writing is one of the very important area we have to give importance, so that they develop the skill of technical writing and they can communication skill, technical writing, all these are very closely taken. And most importantly, it will instill a sense of confidence amongst the students. So this is very, very important area. And I am not going to deliver details on the how sense of confidence, lack of confidence creates problem in the higher education. All of our teachers, and I am sure all of us are very much aware of it. So development of a sense of confidence is very, very important area for success of higher education in the country. So let me try to have a brief discussion on the type of the research projects. There are different disciplines are there, science, arts, humanities, so on and so forth. But the type of research projects may not be same for all disciplines as well. So some of the disciplines may not invite certain parameters that is very closely taken with the scientific research and vice versa. So we have to have a very good understanding of the type of the research projects that are aptly fit to the mental ability or the subject affinity of the students in the respective departments. The descriptive research and analytical research, these are the basic categorization. Descriptive research mostly confine the description of certain historical facts, previous happenings. So we go on descripting the things, and we try to relate the causal factors or eventualities, and we come to certain conclusion. So, for example, we may go for analyzing the factors, causes, and results of the SM aggregation, great SM aggregation. So here we have to go on describing the events in a chronological order. These events have effect on this result, and this event have resulted in this result, and ultimately these are the ultimate findings and ultimate situation we have observed. This is the descriptive. We relate the different facts, different events that happened in previous time, and we try to analyze. And try to find some conclusion that this is the factors that has led to the this situation. In the context of the present pandemic situation, we may say that the unplanned some of the critics are coming that I am not going to submit my own opinion. The unplanned lockdown has created immeasurable misery to the migrant laborers. That is one proposition. Is it true or is it false? So in the situation of pandemic situation, if we say directly, we assume, we consume that proportion that unplanned lockdown create the immeasurable troubles to the migrant workers, whether it is yes or not. We have to go on calculating the all the factors in the chronological order. Then we have to come to some conclusion, and taking into consideration of the very nature of the pandemic, which actually led to declare the lockdown by the Prime Minister of India. So we have to analyze all these things, and we have to go on some kind of conclusion like that. And analytical research is something based on certain data. We have to have some kind of data, then only we can go for analytical research. I am coming later. Conceptual and empirical. Conceptual research is mostly confined to the some conceptual things, which we cannot measure, which we cannot weight, which we cannot from which we cannot find any kind of data. So conceptual research, you may say certain philosophical type of things. Say Byron, say one philosophical school of thinking said like this, and another school of philosophy thought like this. So what is the what is the factors that we should consider to come to a conclusion that this is the way we should consider life, we should consider our social system, we should consider our belief doctrines, so on and so forth. So we cannot generate some kind of data out of the concept. This is the conceptual things. These are the theoretical things. These are the idea through which the further studies are carried out and further assumptions are made. So in contrast to the conceptual type of research, there is empirical type of research. Empirical type of research mostly deal with the data. Without data, nothing can be said in empirical research. While we have to generate data, that means that must be measurable, that must be countable, or that must be weightable. We have to weight it, we have to count it, we have to measure it. Then only we will get some kind of data. Without data, we can't say nothing in empirical type of research. Applied versus fundamental needs no explanation. Theoretical type of fundamental type of research and applied research goes together. Once the fundamental research increase, then only the applied research increase. Say for example, mathematics, chemistry, physics, so on and so forth. All these are very fundamental type of research based on which all the applied research are developing. Applied research, engineering, medical science, so on and so forth. That is why we have to make a very good understanding that fundamental research is the backbone that encourage, that contribute significantly to the development of applied research. Without fundamental research, applied research cannot go further. So quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative means the based on certain facts, based on certain data, based on certain measurable entities, and based on which we go for making some inferences. That is the qualitative term. Say for example, a boy is 6 feet height, a boy is 4 feet height, and we can go for average height, so on and so forth. And we can go for qualitative. Say for example, intelligence of the IQ. If we measure the IQ of the students based on certain, IQ is a qualitative, but based on which data we have calculated the IQ of the students, that is quantitative. So I am trying to present here the formulation of the research problems, how to formulate a research problem for the undergraduate level students. But I am confining the whole discussion, keeping in mind that all these discussions are confined with the undergraduate level of students and not only the higher level of research. So while formulating a research problem for undergraduate students, we should keep in mind certain parameters, that the feasibility of carrying out the research problem, whether the required materials are available at the easy reach, whether they can carry out the survey within their feasible locality. Locality should not be confined within the particular geographical area, but it should be feasible to visit to the field. It should be feasible to meet the respondents, and the time frame, most importantly, time frame, in which time we shall be able to. We cannot assign a research project which needs 6 months or 1 year. We cannot go like that. This is not possible for the undergraduate level of students, which is required, particularly for the PhD and MPhil type of research. So we have to keep in mind, most important factor is the formulation of research project is the financial constant. Financial constant. Apart from the time constant, we have to keep in mind the financial. What kind of financial involvement is there? Whether it is bearable for the students or their guardians, we should keep in mind very carefully. Based on that, we have to assign the topic. We have to help them out. Of course, we have to help them out. Research project will be formulated think out by the students themselves, but we have to help them out to refine it. We have to help them out at better tuning it. Extensive literature survey is the another next step. So before jotting down the research problem exactly, students should be advised to go for an extensive literature survey on the proposed topic. Extensive literature survey, we have to guide them so that what are the sources they should consult by consulting the library of the respective colleges and universities, and help them out. So even we should try to introduce them with the huge domain of the online literature sources, so that they can develop their skill of searching, retrieving, and ultimately downloading, and so on and so forth. The literature sources that is distributed in wide source of online resources. We have to try to introduce them with the online resources. But I must say that online resources is not the only end. We have to make them a habit of visiting to the library of the colleges, and in this regard, college librarians have to play a very significant role, I think, and to guide the students so that they can develop their skill of extensive literature survey. This will invite the searching the library catalog, finding out the relevant literature out of the huge stock of the library. And in this regard, the college librarian, I think, have to play a very, very significant role so that towards developing the literature survey of the students. Conduct a pilot study. Before carrying out the exact research, they should be given a time frame for 15 days or 1 month, whatever possible, to conduct a pilot study based on their subject topic. What is the overall view of the topic, overall scenario of the research domain he or she has undertaken, and based on the pilot study, they will come to in a position that this is the overall picture. This is the overall picture. Of course, at the pilot study level, they are not supposed to expose to the whole domain of the research project. That is to find the exact picture, but they will get a clear picture. They will get a clear picture. Say for example, one literature topic has been assigned. So say for example the reflection of the women in the novels of Assamese novels. So in this regard, we may assign certain topics of certain known works of the novelists of our contemporary time or previous time, and they should give a 1 or 2 novels. They should be studied. Maybe the complete project will cover 10 novels. At the pilot study, we should assign them 2 novels. Based on that, they get a picture. They get an idea of how the women issues or the folklores of Assam has been reflected in the novels of Assam. Total project may be of 10. In the pilot study, it will cover only one or 2 novels only. This is the concept of the pilot study. Same is the case for other disciplines also. Reassess the research problem. Based on the pilot study they have conducted, they will be able to reassess the problem, whether their problem is feasible to complete within a time, whether the project will invite extensive survey covering population, what kind of population they will need to cover, and what kind of methodologies they will have to take into consideration, what kind of research question they will have to formulate, what kind of questionnaire they have to develop, what kind of survey methodologies they have to develop. All these regards will be come into the ground so that they can get a clear idea of how the research project will progress in future. Accordingly, they will reformulate the research project so that all the constants that I have already discussed, the time constant, the economic constants, these are the most important constants, and availability of the resources, availability of the survey populations, feasibility of conduct the survey, all this will be taken into consideration. Accordingly, they will reformulate the research project so that they can complete the research project within a stipulated time frame. This is the next step. And then accordingly, they will design the research design. This is a very huge area, research design, and it needs wide deliberation, wide discussion. But I shall try to cover certain basic things which are required at the beginning level. So research design, I shall come later to research design later on. And accordingly, they will set the objective of the study in the clear terms, in the unambiguous terms. These are the 2 or 3 or maximum 4 or 5. 2 or 3 is better, I think. So that this should be concrete. This should not be overlapping. There should not be any ambiguity from one research objective to another research objective. This is very clearly stated. That should be very clearly narrated. These are the basic requirements, and there should not be any kind of overlapping of the research objective set. Otherwise, at the time of the analysis, at the time of making inferences, it will create a very, very huge problem if there is an ambiguity of the research objective set. So this should be very, very clearly stated. There should not be any kind of ambiguity, so on and so forth. And most important is that research hypothesis. And once again, I must say that in the empirical type of, in the conceptual type of research, there may not be any necessary to formulate a research hypothesis, because research hypothesis invite quantitative data, measurable data. As there is no scope for measurable data in conceptual type of research, so research hypothesis may not be relevant in the conceptual type of research. Of course, I must say that research hypothesis is, since that it is very much closely linked to the data, measurable data that is generated against the different variables. This is aptly fit to analytical type of research only, and for the empirical type of research only. So for the research projects belonging to the disciplines of the where the conceptual type of research is dominant, we should not suggest for formulating a research hypothesis. And of course, I must say that in broader sense, the establishing and setting the research hypothesis in social science is not at all is a mandatory thing, not at all a mandatory thing. Mandatory things. This needs again a wide deliberation. Why it is not mandatory? Because by setting the certain research questions and clearly stated objectives, we may come to conclusion. We may be able to make some kind of inferences. But one of the most important areas of the research is that scientific research. If you think of the scientific research, formulation of hypothesis is must. If you really want to claim that all the scientific method of research has been applied in my research, we have to go for hypothesis. Why is this said like this? In the scientific research needs the accumulation of the data and analysis of data and making the inferences based on the data only. Without data, we can't say anything. And most importantly, the repeatability of the research, repeatability of the test or the experiment conducted by a researcher is a very, very important issue. That means that once I have conducted one test or experiment, that must be repeatable by another one if I clearly explain the method, clearly explain the procedure, tools and techniques and data, apparatus, whatever I have used to carry out the research projects, that must be repeatable by another one sitting another part of the globe, sitting another country, and they must be able to generate the same kind of results, same kind of which I have found. That is the concept of the hypothesis. This is why hypothesis is very, very closely tied to empirical type of research and analytical research, which is not at all have any affinity to the conceptual type of research. They might not be, because conceptual type of research is mostly concerned the immediate and social science only, because immediate and social science issues and the factors, the causal factors may not be same. The factors of the, say for example, food behavior in Assam may not have any affinity with the food behavior of the Latin American people, like that. Housing pattern of the people of Bangladesh may not have any kind of affinity to the housing pattern of the people living in a hilly area or in other parts of the country, which do not have any socio-economic relationship, which do not have any social kind of affinity. You cannot repeat. You cannot repeat. You cannot say it is a universal truth. But scientific research must be universal truth. It must be repeatable. It must be repeatable, given the same environment, given the same method, given the same testing procedure, giving the same ingredient, giving the same variables. It must repeat. It must repeat. It must generate same kind of results again and again, wherever it is conducted. That is why the research hypothesis is very, very closely tied with the empirical type of research or analytical type of research only. We should keep in mind. So again, sample design, I'm coming to sample design. Sample design, we have to go for what kind of sample will aptly meet to come to the conclusion, to fit, to justify to the objectives I have set for the research. And we have to make an assessment, we have to make a analysis, and we have to accordingly set forth our research design so that it may be completed within the stipulated time, and we may justify the objective set for the study. So then once we have designed the sample, we have to go for collection of data. While we go for collection of data, we have to adopt certain methodologies for collection of data. And most common methodology, we are very much familiar with the design of the questionnaire. Questionnaire should be designed. There are so many things to be discussed to design a very good questionnaire. And I don't think that it will be possible to discuss all the parameters here in the limited time. But let me try to cover some of the basic issues. While collecting the data, we have to be very, very careful so that our questionnaire is designed in such a way that it is very, very, very closely tied with the objective set. We should not go not at all beyond the objective. Objectives must be very carefully understood. It should be very carefully conceptualized. Then only we go for the, designing the questionnaire. And the questionnaire should be very much simple. There should not be any kind of ambiguity, and there should not be any kind of repeatability. And the questionnaire should be very, very interesting also for the respondents. And there are so many other things such as it should not be any kind of questionnaire should not be asked to the respondents which might ignite some kind of questionnaire that is related to their religion, related to their sex, related to their economic status, and related to their certain beliefs, so on and so forth. We have to be very much careful to avoid all these things while designing questionnaire. Otherwise, it may create huge problem. And problem means we may not be able to gather the required amount of data. We may not be able to find the required number of respondents so that we may justify our research. So we should try to avoid all these things. Then we have to go for execution of the project. Once the questionnaire is designed, all the interview schedule is another method. We may go for interview schedule also. Also, we may explore some other areas, other data sources through which we may directly gather the secondary data. These are the questionnaire is a source for primary data, and we may take some other secondary sources also. There are so many secondary sources are there. Say our census data. Our different organizations are carrying out the extensive research on different socioeconomic data, or in the scientific fields also. We may gather data from such databases, and we may carry out our research also. It is not necessary that always we have to go for collecting the primary data, but only primary data may suit our research objectives. Either secondary data may suit our research objectives, or sometimes both part of the requirement may be fulfilled by primary data and part of the requirement may be fulfilled by secondary data. We have to make a proper balance. How much data we have to collect from the secondary data sources and how much data we have to collect from the primary sources, so on and so forth. Accordingly, we have to make our plan. And that comes to the analysis of data. While going to the analysis of data, again, analysis of data is a very, very huge area. We have to have a very good understanding of the basics of the statistics and descriptive statistics as well as the analytical statistics. And we have to have the understanding of what kind of data exactly meet, what kind of analysis exactly justify, what kind of analysis will fit to analyze my data, and most importantly, what kind of analysis will lead a sound conclusion, sound inferences to my research projects. That we have to take into consideration while selecting the right parameters of the data analysis. And we have to go for meeting the objectives. So whether my study has justified the objectives, we have to accept the objectives, we have to reject the objectives based on the hypothesis we have set, and we have to ultimately come to the conclusion. Then hypothesis testing. This is most important area. Hypothesis testing means we have to set the hypothesis based on the pilot study. We have based on the pilot study actually by primitive data at the initial data, we have to set some hypothesis. Hypothesis is a assumption of the situation, or to test the already accepted certain beliefs, whether these beliefs are actually valid or whether the beliefs needs to be some kind of modification, and whether the belief to be rejected or accepted, so on and so forth. We have to set the hypothesis accordingly based on certain assumptions that we have conceptualized at the time of the pilot study. At the pilot, after the completion of the pilot study, we will set some hypothesis, and I shall come to hypothesis later on. And we have to test the hypothesis based on the data we have gathered, based on the analysis we have done, and based on the certain statistical procedure which we have carried out on the data, keeping in mind which is closely tagged with the research objectives as well as the research questions, and accordingly we will test the hypothesis, whether the hypothesis is accepted or whether the hypothesis is rejected. And then come to the generalization and interpretation. This is the overall observation of the study. We have to go to the making the inferences based on the study, and this is generally reflected as in the sum of observations, in the sum of conclusions, on the findings and conclusion, or generation or interpretation may be another term which we generally use in our research writings. And then we go for the preparation of the report, and that is the technical part, and how to present the research projects. There are certain set guidelines. Accordingly, we have to prepare the report, and we have to accumulate. We have to present all our methodologies, all our data, all our procedures of analysis, and all the statistical procedure, inferential procedure, which we have used for testing a hypothesis. And based on that, we have to make some kind of comments and concluding remark. Then this is the situation. This is the outcome of the research project I have conducted. So let me go to have a discussion on some basic things which are required to go for sample design. Before developing a sample design, researchers must pay attention to the following: the type of the universe. What kind of samples? What kind of universe means the sample area where I am going to conduct the study. So certain basic features. Universe means the whole population where my study will be conducted. This is the type of universe. If I am going to carry out the research project on the students of the Pandu College, all the students of the Pandu College, then all the students, the total cluster of the students community of the Pandu College will form the universal population. But it may not be possible to cover all the students of the given college due to certain constants. Based on that assumption, we will take a cluster of the students. Say for example, higher secondary students. Again, we may go for more clustering to go for the science stream students or arts stream students, like that. Out of the universe, what I take is the sample. Otherwise, the whole universe probability that my study could be carried out to all the students of the Pandu College, but I am taking only the arts students of Pandu College. This is the sampling units. Otherwise, the type of universe is the total population, and out of the cluster, what I have taken is the sampling units. What I have taken, and sampling units have to be sorted out, and we have to think out of the source list where the data will be available. Say for example, as I have discussed about the two types of data may be there. One is the secondary data, one is the primary data. For primary data, we go for interview, we will go for survey, based on certain questionnaire, and for secondary data, we will be downloading the data from the different data sources. So we have to identify which data sources are there where my required data is available. We have to make an assessment. We have to make an understanding. And what are the most, again, one thing is that for same type of data, there will be different sources. Same type of required data, there will be different sources. Say for example, Government of Assam is also publishing some statistical data time to time in their government official website, and the same type of data may be available in the census data as well. But which data source will meet my requirements? We have to make an understanding. Whether I shall collect my data from the Census of India database, or whether my requirement will be meet more better if I download the data from the Government of Assam website. So we have to make an understanding, and accordingly we have to identify the right sources for the secondary data. Size of the sample, again, what kind of size of the sample will be feasible for me to carry out the research project, as well as to justify the objectives of the study. And we should not be limited to a very small sample size, because a very small size may not give any kind of reasonable understanding of the situation, or it may not lead to reasonable sound conclusion of the research project. So we have to be very careful, make a balance of the size of the sample. Well, how big it should go, how small it should go, there must be a balance. And there is no any benchmark that how big the sample should be, how small the sample should be. But the assumption should be there that the the whole data set should be in such a way that it exactly justify the objective of the study or the scope of the study. We have to make a balance of the size of the sample. And the parameters of interest. In a data set, there are different parameters are there. So if you go for the census data, you will get a wide range of parameters in the census data. Exactly what parameters of the census data, what kind of data will exactly meet my requirement? We have to make a balance. We have to make a clear understanding. Otherwise, if we go for selecting the certain parameters of the data, that there is very high probability that it may be deviated from the very objectives. Data is available there. That is not should be the criteria for selecting the parameters of data. We should try to collect, we should try to identify those parameters of a data set which exactly meet my requirement, which exactly meet my objectives. We should be very careful of selecting the data. And if sometimes required that these parameters, out of the 10 parameters I am interested in, 5 parameters are available, but remaining 5 parameters we have to collect from primary sources. That will have to be very carefully examined. And accordingly, if there is a requirement to go for, there is a compulsion to go for primary data, we have to do that. We have to do that. Again, I have already said the budgetary constraints is very, very important issue for carrying out the successful research project within the stipulated time, more particularly for the undergraduate student. We have to make a very, very carefully make the parameters that we can complete the research project within the certain budgetary constraints. Of course, the time constraint also very much important one. We have to very carefully, we must be very much careful. And sampling procedure. Sampling procedure may be broadly categorized into two, that is probability sampling and non-probability sampling. So I must let me give a explanation of the probability sampling. Probability sampling is based on random sampling. Random sampling, I think there needs no explanation of random sampling. And any random sampling, that is not the whole sequentially I am not going, but I am going to on the random, based on certain judgments, based on certain understanding, based on certain logic. Of course, random should not be arbitrary random. It should be guided by certain guidelines, certain principles, how we should go for random sampling. And non-probability sampling is non-random sampling. It is not a random sampling. It may invite some kind of systematic sampling or some kind of judgmental sampling also. We have to be very careful. And let me make a understanding of the random sampling. Restricted sampling and unrestricted sampling needs no explanation, I think. So let me go for the random sampling and non-random sampling. This is a very basic things we have to make the students aware that the representative sampling. While we go for random sampling, we should be very careful that our sample population or the sample size gives a very clear representation of the whole universe of the population I am going to study, or that otherwise it may lead to certain erroneous inferences. It may lead to certain wrong assumption about the survey population. Otherwise, if our sample size does not have a proper representation of the universe of sampling that I am going to study. So probability sampling is the simply say, you may say, if you suppose taken six dice at your hand, if you throw it out towards the air, and if all the units of the dice enjoys equal privileges to return to your hand, that is the concept of probability sampling. So I repeat, if you throw the small size of the units of the sample freely in the air without any artificial situation in the free environment, if you throw it, if all the samples enjoy all the units of the items that were at your hand enjoys equal privileges to return to your hand, that means you are justifying the probability sampling. That means there is no any biasness, there is no any previous assumption, and your sample size does not covered by any kind of previously assumed doctrines. So that should be avoided to go for a proper statistical analysis based on probability sampling. So I'm not discussing about the quota sampling. We may go for purposive sampling is also there based on certain previously assumed purpose. So we may go for quota sampling. We may segregate some kind of quota out of the universe of sampling. And as I have discussed already, judgmental sampling. So my sampling size will be very much guided by certain previously assumed judgment. Say for example, we may say that if I take up a research to study the disease resistance capacity of the child in the slum area is very high. Disease resistant capacity of the child in the slum area is very high. That is my judgment. Based on the judgment, all my research project will be guided. So otherwise, to go for a complete random sampling, we must avoid the judgmental, previously assumed judgmental. This is one of the major problems of judgmental sampling. Otherwise, my whole research project will be guided by the previously assumed judgment. So to go for a proper statistical analysis, to go for a proper scientific analysis, to adopt all the scientific methods of research, we have to go for pre-probability sampling that I am discussing about. Again, complex random sampling also there. Of course, probability sampling have different areas. We have to understand systematic sampling and stratified sampling, cluster sampling, area sampling, multi-stage sampling, and sequential sampling. So again, all these areas again needs some kind of broader deliberation. So still, let me try to have a discussion on the very briefly, whatever possible. Systematic sampling means the certain systematic parameters I have adopted while calculate the sample size of the universal population. Say for example, every nth number of students in the say roll number, say there are suppose 60 students are enrolled in a class. If I go for taking my sample for every fifth student, so first student, fifth student, 10th student, 15th, 20, like that, it will go. And this is called systematic sampling, every nth term of the sample. And there's a problem of systematic sampling is that maybe don't take it otherwise, every fifth student is a girl child, whether my research project does not have any kind of affinity to study the certain behavior of the girl students. My objective was to study the whole the students as a whole. It may lead to a wrong conclusion. It may lead to a wrong conclusion. This is one of the problem of systematic sampling. Or these are probability factors. It may not happen or may happen, but probability is there. That every fifth student will be a girl student, or every fifth student will be may belongs to a particular socioeconomic group. This may lead. There's a high probability. That is why our best proposition should go to this stratified sampling. We have to make some kind of cluster, small cluster amongst the students, and we try to gather a good representative sampling from each and every cluster. Of course, stratified sampling and cluster sampling goes together. We have to make small groups, and out of the small groups, based on certain judgment of the size of the size of the group, we have to draw certain representative sampling from the strata, from the each and every strata we have formulated out of the whole universal population. And there are certain other things have to be discussed, the standard deviation of the certain variables of the each and every strata. If the standard deviation is the very high among a particular strata, we have to go for higher number of samples from each strata. If the standard deviation is less, relatively less, we may confine to a smaller sample, because standard deviation is higher means there is a wide variability. To go for wide variability sample, we have to go for broader sample. If the standard deviation is less, that means there is a less deviation, less variability among the sample units in a given strata. So small standard deviation will imply small number of population, and broader and higher standard deviation will imply to go for higher sample size. This is the background of stratified sampling. And cluster sampling, area sampling, this is the based on cluster. Area means certain making some area we demarcated. Multi-stage sampling, again, a very complex things. We have to understand. I am skipping all these things. Sequential sampling is the same things. We have to have some kind of basic understanding, because let me confine my discussion within the stratified sampling and cluster sampling only. So systematic sampling, I have already discussed, and stratified sampling, the homogeneousness, I have already discussed. 11 questions to attend the stratified sampling. Here, the how to form the strata, that I have already discussed. That based on the while formulating the strata, we should be very careful to go for what is the standard deviation of the small each and every strata. So there is a mathematical expression, and this is a mathematical expression. I shall be sharing the slide, and I'm sure you will be able to go through it, and you will have a good understanding of these things. So here, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma k are the standard deviation of the k strata. N1, N2, Nk, the size of the k strata, and how much sample we have to draw. There is small n1, small n2, and small nk. That the size of the population we have to draw from the whole strata. It gives ni, n, ni sigma 1. Sigma I, that sigma I means any standard deviation from a given strata, and it will go up to the last strata, that is the Nk. And accordingly, we will draw the proper sample size, proper representative sampling to justify my research work. So let me go for the experimental research design, and it might be interested to the participants which belongs to particularly in the science field. There are so many different methods are there, and informal experimental design. Informal means that is a before and after without control design. Control design means that is a while the particular treatment is not applied to the particular sample. There is a control. And if we apply the particular treatment to a particular entity or particular experiment, that means by after control or before control. That is a other than the control design. Control design means where no kind of treatment is applied. And experimental design, we may this is a before control after design is a very common method we generally applied in the life sciences, particularly botany, zoology, and so on and so forth, some related areas. Say, for example, we are going to experiment the effect of certain hormones on the development of a plant. We may go for informal experimental design. Before applying the hormone in certain concentration, we may try to gather the data, and after applying the certain hormone of certain concentration to a particular sample of plants plant sampling, we may go like that, and we may have to keep one control sample where no kind of treatment is applied. Accordingly, we will generate the data, and accordingly we may go for calculation of the effect of the hormone of the growth of the plants on certain percentage or certain concentration, and this is the best concentration. This is the best hormone we can apply to the growth of the saplings in a given period of time. This way we may come to certain conclusion. That is the concept of the informal experimentation based on control and uncontrolled design or applied experimental designs. So again, we may go for formal experimental design, completely randomized design, CR design is called, and randomized block design. This is again needs some kind of wide deliberation, and latent square design, LS design, and I am skipping all this. Factorial design is also another design method, but in the undergraduate level, we may stick to the informal experimental design, based on which is carried out based on certain very basic parameters of applying a particular treatment to a particular experiment, how it responds, and without applying the particular treatment, and how it responds, and what's the differences. What is the differences? We may calculate, and based on that, I think this will give a very good understanding of the students at the undergraduate level to carry out a project work in the limited time, in a limited scope. Again, let me have a discussion on the data types. Particularly, this is the belongs to the experimental design, or we may say it is based on the domain of the analytical and empirical type of research. So there are different types of data types are there. We have to try to introduce the students with the data types. What are the different parameters of the, what are the different criteria we can select the data out of the sample population to carry the research. Of course, this is very much closely taken while designing the questionnaire. To develop an effective questionnaire, we have to have a very good understanding of the different data types. If we set the question in such a way that there is no chances of generating the data which we are actually interested in, accordingly, our questionnaire should be in such a way that it exactly generates, it exactly brings those data which we are interested in to justify our research work. Nominal data based on certain name is given, single, married, widow, divorce, but it should be very careful. We should be very careful while calculating the data that the married means 2. It does not mean not in any way that 2 into 2 is equal to 4. It does not mean that 2 married means 1 divorce. And most of the time students make this mistake. Married means 2 and divorce have a 4 score. We should not be we should be very careful that 2 married does not mean 1 divorce. Otherwise, all the research study will be ruined. So we should be very careful. We should give a very clear introduction to the students that the nominal data, ordinal data based on certain order. When the values are in order in certain attribute, it is called ordinal data or ordinal scale is used. Say for example, first position, second position, third position, fourth position. This is arranged based on certain order. This is called the ordinal data. Interval data means this is very common data set, data type we use in our statistical analysis. We are very much accustomed to the interval data. We give some kind of interval and we generate the scores, and ultimately we go on making some intervals based on certain content, certain convenient interval beginning and to end. We have to be very careful, but we should submit that the interval scale should be, whatever possible, it should be small scale. That the difference from the first interval to the last interval, it should be very small, and we should be try to segregate more and more intervals whatever possible, so that our research goes to the more and more intensive one. Ratio data needs no explanation. This is based on certain ratio. So one of the another very common type of data and technique we generally apply, that is weighted scale. So we give some weights in the questionnaire based on the opinion of the respondents to a proposition to a questionnaire, which they think. So most of the times we give strongly agree, agree, and you may do not say, do not know, cannot say, do not know, that is neutral, and he or she respondent may be disagree, or he or she may be strongly disagree. Based on the questionnaire, based on the objectives, we should be very careful to design the questionnaire based on the weighted scale. This is a very effective method to carry out the statistical analysis and to apply the inferential statistics based on the weighted scale. That is why we give more importance to the weighted scale while carrying out the research, particularly in the social sciences. So again, there are so many things to be discussed about the weighted scale. It is not that we should go for five scale weighted scale. We may go for 3 scale weighted scale also, 1 to 3 also. Again, we may sometimes, if required, we may reverse the weight also. Say for example, out of the 10 questionnaire, the 8 or 7 questionnaire goes in the same direction, say strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly agree, fine. But we may need in such a questionnaire, the same set of questionnaire, such a question in the questionnaire, that it is generally reversed in order. Actually, the proportion is in negative. But if I ask the questionnaire in the same pattern, it may give a wrong reflection of the questionnaire. So we should be very careful. In that case, we give a minus score to the respective weight. Say for example, this is generally a questionnaire. Question does not give it does not agree, it is disagree. But we are putting as agree as 4. This may give a wrong notion. So we have to reverse the score, -4, -3, -2, or -1 like that. And in the same questionnaire, there is no any objection that in the same set of questionnaire, we may give a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Also, if required, we may give reverse score also. So how we will calculate? I'm giving a small example here. Say for example, these are the question 1, question 2, question n. These are the questions I have given to the respondents, and there are a number of respondents are x1, x2, and xn. And the respective weights, either 1, either 2, either 3, 4, or 5, the weight is say W1, W2, or Wn. This is the weight against the particular question 1, question 2, or question n. And the weighted score will be x1 into W1, x2 into W2, xn into Wn, and so forth. And the total sum of the total weight will be sum of the x1 into x1 plus x1 into W2 plus, it will go up to xn into Wn. This is the sum of the total weight against the particular parameter under which we have designed n number of questionnaire. This is the total weight of the given parameters through which we design the questionnaire and we generate the response from the respondents. But this is very effective, and I must say that this is a weight based on the weighted scale. If we apply the statistical parameters, more particularly the inferential statistical parameters, and acceptability of the findings is very high. Acceptability of the findings is very high if we carry out the research based on the weighted scale. Let me have a discussion on the different methods of observation, methods of data collection. Observation method. Without carrying out a questionnaire, we may find some kind of data. We may tabulate the data based on certain observation. Say for example, what we have observed without without taking into consideration of the response of the respondents. Based on certain observation, we may collect the data. Say for example, type of the crops grown in a particular crop field. We may collect the data based on observation. There is no need of any kind of feedback to be received from the respondents. This is the observation method. We have collected the data based on our researchers' observation skill, based on the researchers' observation he or she that had carried out. And we may go for interview method, and we may go for questionnaire method, and scheduling. Scheduling is very important to carry out a very successful research. Most of the time, what we do, we design the questionnaire, we send the questionnaire to the respondents. And most of the time, what happens, the respondents may, or some part of respondents may not be well accustomed, well aware exactly what is the notion of the particular question the researcher has asked. So he or she, the respondent, I am taking to respondents, may be confused to give the proper response. And arbitrarily, he or she may give yes, no, 4, 5, 6, like that. And that is a high probability of getting some non uh, some non-representative data or some erroneous data. To avoid this problem, we have to take the scheduling method along with the question of whatever possible. It is not possible to, sometimes it may not possible to go for 100% scheduling method, but we should try at least a considerable percentage to cover the considerable percentage of the respondents based on the scheduling. Scheduling means the researcher goes to the respondents and he or she explain the very basic notion of the questioner, why he or she has asked the questioner, and to explain the meanings of the certain terms which the respondent may not be able to understand. So this is called scheduling method. We should try to follow the scheduling method, and simply not to throw the questionnaire to the respondents and wait for the response and to carry out the research. This is not a very sound method to follow the questionnaire method. And this is again very closely tagged to go for interview method. In the interview, you cannot throw any interview questionnaire to the respondents and to wait for the responses from the survey population. You have to try to meet the respondents and to explain why you are asking this question and what is the basic notion and basic objective of the question. So scheduling is very, very important to carry out a very successful piece of research. We have to try to meet at least as a sizable percentage of the respondents. It may not be possible to cover all the respondents 100%, but we should try to cover at least a significant portion of the respondents based on the scheduling. So case study is again another method we are very much familiar with. We have taken a particular case, a particular observation, we confine to a particular effect, a particular happenings, and we carry out the research extensively on the particular case. So this is the, again, let me have some kind of some discussion based on the hypothesis, formulation of hypothesis. This is very much important to carry out a successful piece of research. A hypothesis is an assumption of the particular belief or particular things that we have conceptualized at the time of our pilot study which we have carried out, and we try to validate the assumption based on the first-hand data that we generate in our research projects. So research projects must be very closely taken accordingly. Once we be able to jot down a very sound piece of hypothesis, 1 or 2 hypotheses in my research projects, that will be a radar, that will be a guiding force to all the whole exercise that we carry out to complete the research project. So I personally believe that the formulation of a research hypothesis, particularly in social science, should be introduced at the undergraduate level, so that they may understand, they may conceptualize the power of a hypothesis to lead to a very successful piece of research. These are the things we have to be very careful while jotting down our research hypothesis. It must be confined to the research questions. We should not go beyond the research questions or the research objectives. It should be confined, and we should be very careful not to make any kind of inferences, not to make any kind of conclusions based on the generalized conclusion based on the particular research project we have conducted. Sometimes it is seen that students make some generalized conclusion, generalized comment based on the particular myopic type of research he or she has conducted, but it is not exactly. Say, for example, I have conducted a study on the reading habits of the students or the teachers of Pandu College, and based on certain findings I have found, then I am going to make some kind of conclusion that the teachers of College of Gauhati or the Gauhati prefer this type of books. So this is a wrong notion. We should not go beyond that, because my study was confined to the Pandu College only, or to 1 or 2 colleges in Gauhati only. How I can make a generalized conclusion of the reading habit of the teachers of the entire Gauhati? No, this should not be avoided. This should be very careful. So in this case, the hypothesis help us to confine to our research domain. and must have relationship to certain variables. And our variables should be that I have already discussed, that variables should be very carefully selected. Parameters of interest, which are the parameters of the whole survey population I am interested in, which should be very careful. And our research hypothesis should be in such a way that we can draw the required data set from a given variable which is available in my data set. If at the time of testing of the hypothesis is required some other variables which was out of the domain of my survey, out of the domain of my data set, there it will create problem, or it may lead to a wrong perception, it may lead to a wrong conclusion if I draw like that. So we should be very careful to jot down our research hypotheses which must be within the variables which I have selected to carry out my research projects, and it must have a very reasonable relationship of the variables. Otherwise, all the testing procedures will be wrong. It should be very clear and precise. It should be very clear and understood. There should not be any kind of ambiguity of the terms I am using in the research hypothesis. And again, I must say, capable of being testing. Without a hypothesis, without testing, applying certain statistical procedure, inferential procedure cannot be a valid hypothesis. Based on certain assumption, based on certain data that is apparent in my data set, we should not go for making a conclusion, making a yes or no, accepted or rejected of the hypothesis. It must be tested. And a hypothesis which is concluded without testing cannot be a valid hypothesis. So testability is one of the very important parameters while jotting down the hypothesis. Should be amenable to testing with the reasonable data set. Again, all the things are very closely related. Gauri, am I running out of time?
Yeah, you can finish within 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. So let me discuss one thing I have skipped. That is the continuous data and discrete data. And continuous data means, and most of the time the students make a mistake to apply the right kind of statistical procedure, right kind of analysis based on the data set. So continuous data means the data set where any kind of data is possible within the minimum and maximum of the data set. I repeat, continuous data is those data where any kind of data or any data is possible within the minimum or maximum of the data set. And discrete data is that data set where no any interpolation, no any middle data is possible between the minimum and maximum. Let me give an example. If we measure the heights of the students of the college, it may high probability that it may go for 4 feet to 6 feet, right? So 4 feet is the minimum range of my data set, and 6 feet is the high end of my data set. But here, any kind of data is possible. 4.1 inch, 4.2 inch, 4.3 inch, 4.11 inch, 4.111 inch, 12 inch. If we go for more precision, we may go like that. But this type of data will be called as a continuous data. That means any kind of data is possible. Any kind of data is possible between minimum and maximum of the data set. That is called continuous data. And the discrete data is that where any kind of middle data interpolation is not possible. Say, for example, if we say the number of child of a family, it may go for 1, 2, 3. But in between, 1 is the minimum of the data set and 3 is the highest of the data set. But in between, no interpolation is possible. 1.5, 1.2 numbers of child is not possible. So this kind of data is called discrete data. We should be very much careful while designing our questionnaire, so that there is our question does not create any kind of problem from the respondents' end, so that they can give right kind of response. And again, why I'm giving stress on the continuous data and discrete data is that most of the time to carry out the statistical analysis, to go for tabulation, we have to convert the continuous data to discrete data based on certain interval scales. That is why the relevancy of the interval scale. We have to convert certain continuous data to the discrete data. Then only we may carry out the required descriptive analysis as well as the inferential analysis based on certain statistical procedure. So we should be very careful to introduce the students about the interval data and the very background of the continuous and discrete data. And statistically, it is not possible to apply the all statistical procedure to a set of discrete data, which is otherwise possible to apply in the continuous data. So with this, I think I have come to the end of the session. So I shall be happy to have a discussion if there is any confusion is there or any kind of clarification is required from the participants. Over to Gauri.
Yes, Varman sir.
Yeah. So participants may interact with sir if they have any query on this on the presentation.
Okay, I will unmute all the participants. They may ask questions. Sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, it is audible.
Yes, thank you. Myself, Avinash. Actually, sir, I have seen that there are few literatures available on the fixation of size of sample. Is it available any formula for fixing the size of a sample for a study, sir? Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
I don't. Yeah. Am I audible? Hello. Am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, Hazarika,
Am I
sir.
audible?
Yes, Hazarika, sir.
Yeah. I don't think that there are any strict benchmark to go for the size of the sample. The notion is that we should go for making some kind of strata, some kind of segments out of the universal population of my interest, and make some kind of justification based on the initial observation that what is the standard deviation of the parameters I am interested in. There may be so many parameters, but out of the n number of parameters, I am interested to say 2 or 3 parameters of the sample. So I should carry out a basic survey to carry out the standard deviation, to find the standard deviation. If the standard deviation of my parameters of interest is high, we should go for higher size of the sample from that given strata. Am I clear? And
Yes,
if
sir.
the standard deviation is less, relatively less, it will be, of course, we have to use the term relatively less. We may confine to a smaller size of the sample to be drawn from the given strata. Accordingly, we will go on multiplying the N1, that is the N1, say, assume it as a number of the population in the particular strata, and sigma 1 is the standard deviation of the particular strata. We will multiply sigma 1 into N1, and what the result is drawn, we'll take the sample. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Higher deviation means higher heterogeneity.
Yes.
And small deviation means small heterogeneity. Small for a sample strata where there is a small heterogeneity, we may give a well-representative population where there is a deviation is very less. But while there is a high deviation, we have to go for higher sample size. That is the justification, I think, to go for the proper representative sampling out of the universal sampling based on applying the stratified sampling method as well as the strata sampling method.
Actually, sir, I have seen few literatures, so I asked you, sir.
Sometimes they take some benchmark, 30%, 40%. Yes. It depends upon the researchers, and yes, it depends upon the type of the strata or type of the variable he or she is interested in. But I don't think that there is any strict benchmark to follow a particular percentage of the sample. I think the proper justification should go for to see the deviation. Where the high deviation is there, we should go for higher population. A small deviation means small standard deviation means small sample size.
Small.
We'll give a proper representation of the sample size.
Okay. Sir, before fixing our objectives of a study, we have to go to the extensive literature review.
Yeah.
Am I right, sir?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Without fixing our objectives, how can I go to extensive literature review for the which are related to my objectives, sir?
So first thing is that that is why I am giving stress on a pilot study. Before jotting down the exact your objectives, you should go for a pilot study to see. You have some assumption, you have some research question in mind. Otherwise, you are not taking the particular population to study. Some observations, some assumptions you have. Take these assumptions as the initial objectives, and take this assumption as an initial guideline for the study, and I go for carry out a basic pilot study. Say, for example, if you are interested to go for 1,000 population or 500 population, take a sample pilot study on 50 or 100. 50 or 100, that will comply at least 10% and 20%. Then you will reassess whether your objectives in mind, research questions in mind are exactly reflecting in the survey population, or it needs some kind of modification or redrafting or realigning. Accordingly, you realign or redraft your objectives. That is why pilot study is very, very important to carry out a successful research projects. Most of the assumptions, most of our understandings, most of our research questions might be nullified. Maybe some kind of new research questions might emerge if we carry out the pilot study. Accordingly, we have to go for drafting the exact objectives for my study. So most of the times, students get confused. They have some kind of initial assumptions based on the population, and while they have carried out the questionnaire, they have carried out the analysis, and they cannot meet with the objectives. That means the objectives was erroneous. That objectives does not apply fit to the survey population. All those data parameters are not available in the survey population. Available data parameters, attributes which you are interested in should be available in the survey population. Then only you will be able to generate the right kind of data sets. That is why pilot study is the very, very important step before exactly drafting your objectives.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? So I think there is no questions from the participant side. So then let us then conclude the session. Is it Hazarika, sir? We can conclude. Hello.
Yes.
You can leave now.
Oh yes, sir. Yeah. So thank you
Yes.
very much, Dr. Hazarika, sir, for giving us this wonderful lecture. We definitely hope the faculty members from different institutions will be benefited to guide their students in doing research works. So thank you very much once again. So we shall
Thank you,
meet.
sir, for giving me the opportunity with all the luminaries from the different colleges and different institutions to have a discussion. And I shall be grateful. I shall be happy if the presentation gives some kind of ignition and satisfy the objectives of the inculcating the very spirit of research in the undergraduate level in the colleges and different institutions of our country, of our region.
Sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sir.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Sir, I want to ask a question.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Excuse me, sir. Wait. What is the difference between? Excuse me, sir. Wait. Oh. Sorry, sir. Sorry. I have to see the slides of you. your slides, but it is not available here.
Which
Sorry,
slide?
sorry.
Should I scroll down? Regarding
No,
just let me know that
first one.
this one.
First one. Types of research, sir.
This one.
Types of research, sir.
Type of research project, is it?
Yes.
Descriptive
Yes,
process
this
and-
one.
Yeah.
Yes, this one, sir. What is
Yeah.
the difference between analytical research and empirical research, sir?
Yeah, it is not exactly, there is some differentiation, analytical and empirical.
Yes.
Analytical means without data also we may go for some kind of analysis.
Yes.
But very strictly we must say empirical research must be carried out based on data. Without data, we cannot carry out empirical research. But without certain measurable data, we may carry out some kind of analytical research. We may go on and certain historical facts, say for example, historical facts. We may go for extensive analysis of the historical facts based on certain chronological happenings, chronological events that we have taken into consideration. Say this happening have some kind of direct reflection on the so and so happenings in the future time. This is analytical. But the empirical research must be carried out based on data. Am I clear?
Yes, sir, yes. Actually, I think that analytical research is also carried out with the help of data. So I accept.
The empirical research obviously will invite analysis, but without also empirical valid data set based on certain attributes, we may carry out analytical research. Say for example, historical facts, say for example, any social happenings, so for example, any literature review, so on and so forth. Maybe some we may find some kind of an analysis based on the effect of the writings of Shakespeare on the writings of Lakshmanath Besbarua. This will be carried out analytical research, maybe.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Hello, yes.
Hello. I just want to know. Actually, in undergraduate level, there is a project paper for 6th semester students. But they have very zero knowledge of research methodology. I mean, the students, like in postgraduate students, they have research methodology paper, but for undergraduate students, it's very difficult to make them understand a project, how a project they can start a project and what are the methods. So there are certain methods to do a project, so it's very difficult. So how to make them understand that and without a research methodology course.
I think this is the basic objectives of introducing this project course at the undergraduate level, so that we should try to introduce the students with the basics of the research methodology. Research methodology, of course, a very huge area. It may not be possible to introduce all the areas of the research methodology incomplete at the undergraduate level, because so many constants are there, time constant and the resource constant and their scope of study, all these constants are there. But still we should try our level best to introduce the basics of the research methodology, so that they can develop, they are ignited to develop their skill of questioning, skill of analysis, skill of observation, so on and so forth. I think this is the basics objectives of introducing the project works at the undergraduate level.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Whatever possible, we should try our level best.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you then. We shall meet at 2 p.m. for the last session of the program. So immediately after that, there will be the valedictory session. So as you know, it will be immediately after finishing the session 2 of at 2 p.m. So thank you once again to the resource person and all the participants.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
thank you
all
very
the
much, sir.
participants. Thank
Yes,
you all
sir.
the
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.